Today we will be discussing how the Columbian Exchange impacted the triangular trade. The widespread transmission of technology, plants, culture, and human populations from the Columbian Exchange beginning the 15th century by connecting the Old and New Worlds together had impacted the triangular trade by increasing the demand of slavery, incentivizes capitalistic reform, encouraging the use of technological innovation, expanding upon the existing demand of sugar trade, an influx of disease exchange, raw material and ammunition trade, and initiating gradual rebellion and resistance to slave-related institutions. Europeans settled in North and South America during the 1500s, and when they arrived, they established plantations and other endeavors that required a massive demand for slaves. The objective of the European traders was to profit from trade. They wanted African slaves in return for their rum, cloth, and guns. In the diagram of a slave ship, two techniques were described in order to transport the slaves. The first was loose packing, where fewer slaves were carried in ships in hopes that more would survive. The second method was called tight packing, where slaves were crammed into a large ship in order to maximize the number of slaves transported. Also described in the diagram, the ship was divided into three sections. Each shelf and the one below had only 2 feet and 7 inches between. Nevertheless, there was a strong desire in the Americas and the Spanish colonies for a greater workforce composed of slaves due to the need to produce more staple goods, such as tobacco and cotton in the north and sugar in the south, as a result of the Columbian Exchange. European colonization of the Americas was made substantially easier through several technological innovations like compasses, caravels, and astrolabes, which were peaking in popularity of European use during the 15th and 16th century. It affected economic development by making it possible for large-scale trade networks between the Old World and the New World to develop. The development and convenience of such technologies met the ever-growing demand of commodities such as sugar and cotton from the triangular trade. The Columbian Exchange also affected the demand of sugar within the triangular trade. In 1733, the Act of Parliament of Great Britain was designed and passed in order to protect the British sugar industry in the Caribbean and the molasses processing industry in New England. The act better secured and encouraged trade of His Majesty's sugar colonies in America. The King's sugar colonies emerged as a great byproduct of the trade, navigation, and the strength of his kingdom, all of which have been considerably influenced by the Columbian Exchange. These sugar colonies grew to become one of the biggest exports of the Americas to Europe in the triangular trade. Having the Old World connect with the New World brought newfound interactions, including the transmission of infectious diseases. These epidemics took upon a substantial effect on labor in the Americas, hence a preference was developed to have African slaves over Native Americans. As slaves came to the Americas from Africa, raw materials were sent to Europe from the Americas, such as rum, tobacco, molasses, and sugar, which were primarily collected from the West Indies, and then later manufactured goods came from Europe to Africa, hence completing the cycle of triangular trade that bolstered European commerce and manufacturing. The movement of guns from Britain to Africa escalated violence, especially after the late 17th century. Weaponry played an immense role when it came to the increasing demand of slaves as a result of the Columbian Exchange. However, gunpowder was not only exchanged for slaves, but were also used to capture them. West African rulers were instrumental in the slave trade. They exchanged their prisoners of war for firearms manufactured in Birmingham and elsewhere in Britain. With their newly acquired weapons, kings and chiefs were able to expand their territories. This gun for slaves hypothesis was advanced by scholars such as Basil Davidson and Joseph Inquiry. That imported firearms Africa consumed from Europe in exchange for slaves revolutionized West Africa's military strategy, like the Dahomey Empire in Africa during the 18th century, by rapidly expanding over neighboring societies through their increasing arsenal of ammunition while maintaining an adequate flow of slaves towards the West African coast. In 1789, an autobiography published by Olaudah Aquino exemplifies the brutal demands of the plantation Aquino faced as a slave himself, which later became a bestseller autobiography that contributed to the abolitionist cause for the slave trade. Additionally, newfound American ideals regarding the right for individuals to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, along with French morals aligning similarly to liberty, equality, and fraternity, coherently came together to promote a universal sense of equality within all humans to further stimulate the abolitionist cause within the slave Atlantic trade.